I'm Gord Duff with Sotheby's, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Gord, what a pleasure to be with you in Ontario and to be sitting among a prized collection that is behind us. And you are at the center of a lot of swirling news of late. Not only because the auctions are coming back online and collectors are really excited to be back together again, but probably for a little sale that occurred in May.
Right.
So tell me, let's start off by having you just tell me a little bit about the Uhlenhaut 300 SLR.
I mean, obviously an amazing achievement for our company. It wasn't something that, kind of was even on our radar at the first of the year, and it just evolved over a couple other transactions and conversations we had been having with Mercedes-Benz, and it came together rather quickly, and I don't know if anyone would have guessed at the final price that the car would have brought, but it's an amazing achievement, and something that is part of the history of our company now, to be a part of selling that car for the most money a car has ever brought publicly. And
we should probably mention the amount,
doing it with Mercedes.
Right? Yeah, $142 million US.
Yes, that's correct. So,
did this surprise you?
Yeah, when initial conversations were started of this car being the first one to bring over 100 million, obviously it's definitely a car that was capable of doing that, but to see it hit 100 million and then continue to go to sell for a final price of 135 million euros, it was unbelievable.
Why was it so valuable?
It was a car that could never be purchased. It was never for sale. It was one of those things, it didn't matter how much money you had, it just wasn't for sale. And the fact that it had been with the Mercedes-Benz factory since new, I mean, I don't know of many other automobiles that would have that kind of history, pedigree, everything to go along with it.
Where are we now in the auction market? You obviously transitioned quite quickly around COVID. Mm-hmm. And immediately went into a virtual world, much like the rest of the world did.
Yep.
But how have we come out of the COVID time period? Because there were some who thought that auction prices were going to tank around COVID.
Yep.
The opposite happened.
I think there might have been a little, dip for a month or two, when everything was first setting in, because nobody really knew what was going to happen. And by, May, June, July of that year, it just started taking off, and just every auction, every car sale just seemed to surprise you that it was just gaining more and more traction. I think obviously there were a lot more eyeballs looking at things to purchase while everybody was sitting at home, but I think the global reach of collector cars has just grown tremendously over the last couple years, and a lot more people have gotten comfortable with buying cars, sight unseen. I wouldn't say not necessarily old cars, but definitely more of the modern era is, looking at a Carfax, looking at 200 photos, you can kind of get a good sense of, the quality of the car, and people are getting more comfortable doing that kind of transaction than, 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
What do you think you've learned as a company in this, having gone through this?
I mean, we were very fortunate that we were building our own platform pre-COVID to be able to transition so quickly. I mean, we transitioned an auction in a matter of 9 days from being a live on-site sale to an online auction, and we're very successful selling, over $15 million worth of cars on a platform that we had only sold 1 or 2 cars on before. And I think it just, expanded the way that we can offer cars for sale right now. And, we've even developed a new online auction where we're doing private bid sales. So we've done 3 vehicles to date where, the final price isn't publicly known, but we've been offering very special cars like the white Enzo that we just sold last week and it was a unbelievable, achievement for our company, and something that nobody else is doing. So we're, continuing to develop on the digital side as much as we are, going back to our live events.
And it's interesting because I've heard you say that those interested in the auction business as a whole, collectors in general, really love that touch and feel still. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing that came out of what you endured for the last 2 years, is that being in person was still just as important for many people.
Yeah, I think it's why people still go to concerts, right? It's one thing to get, a file sent to you digitally, but it's another thing to hear your favorite band live. And I think going to a car auction, it's excitement of seeing your friends again, and it is lots of people still want to touch and feel and test drive and see the car in person for themselves. And we're able to create that, getting great cars together and offering them, and it's come back stronger than ever.
You're at the essence or the nexus of cars and culture, as this show suggests. Mm-hmm. Are you? Do you consider yourself a protector of culture as it relates to cars?
Yeah, I think we try and do a very good job on opening up unknown history of cars when we're bringing them to auction. I was just reading some of the descriptions that I'm proofing for cars that we're selling in Monterey, and we're unearthing previous information that was never known about the car, whether it be the coach builder or ownership history or different things that happen to a vehicle over its lifetime. And history was never something that I was into in school, but I love reading about and learning about these cars that we're able to bring to market, and what we're able to discover about them, and kind of bring out new information that people never knew of on that particular car. So I do think we're there to keep the culture going as much as we're in the business of selling cars. And myself and most people that work here, all of us, like, we have a love for this stuff. So yeah, it's a job, but it's like I love touching, driving, selling, learning about the next great car that kind of comes through the doors.
It's the stories, isn't it, as much as the vehicle?
Yeah. We have an interesting clientele too. So that's like personally one of the things that I love is like meeting the people that we get to deal with that buy and sell these cars, and learning about them as much as about, special cars that they have in their collection.
Is the one thing that they have in common the fact that they all share that thread of the love for the automobile above all else?
Yeah. Yeah, and learning how did they get into owning or loving or always wanting a 300 SL or, a Duesenberg, right? I've remember one of our clients, and he owns the Duesenberg that he got a ride in Colorado when he was like 12 years old. The guy driving it, he was fascinated by the car. He took him for a ride. He owns that car today. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We recently spent some time with Bruce Meyer, who showed us his barn find that is likely priceless on the Bugatti side.
Yep.
What is your view on the possibility of barn finds anymore? Does that still occur? Is it something that you come across, or is it increasingly rare and rare?
You would think they've all been discovered,
right?
But they kind of, still show up. And whether it's a barn find that it was parked in 1938 and it's a 1930s car, or whether it was put away in the 50s, right? And nobody knew about it till now. But yeah, there's still things being pulled out, and I think that's part of my job, that I find super interesting, is you never know a phone call you might get or somebody that you go see, and I'm always excited to walk in the garage if it's somebody I don't know, to see what's in their garage, because you just never know. But yeah, barn finds are kind of still out there.
Is there one that sticks in your mind as a real special moment?
Maybe not. I've back when I was transporting cars for our company, I remember pulling a 540K out of a garage that it had been sitting in since the 50s in West Virginia. But I pulled a Ferrari Daytona Coupe out of a condo in Toronto, And that was super cool. And the guy bought it brand new, was skiing in Switzerland, saw it at an auto show somewhere, went to Ferrari, bought it, shipped it back to New York, drove it across the border. I don't know how he got it into Canada, right, without paying everything. And then in the early 90s, he had to go back to Asia for business his family was in, and he put it up on blocks and left it. And until I think we sold that car in 2015, but I was the first one to pull the cover off it since then.
Wow.
And take it off the jack stands and bring it here and get it back up and running and sell it. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
We had one of the alloy Daytona coupes that we discovered and sold at our Ferrari auction in Maranello back in 17. That was a pretty amazing find for us as well.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier. You're a vehicle you were transporting. You started at the lowest rung at this company.
Mm-hmm.
You were 18 years old, right? Tell me the story of the high school co-op student who gets to sit in the chair that you're sitting in now.
Yeah. Just my father knew one of the guys that was running the restoration shop at the time. He was able to get me in as a internship for high school, and I came in and I was cleaning cars, detailing cars, wiping down cars in our what we called our showroom at the time, but laying underneath cars, degreasing chassis, but getting them ready for shows. And that's kind of how it started, was just detailing, and then they found out that I could drive a trailer, or I told them I could, and then it was, could you go pick up this car across town, and then could you go to Windsor or Toronto, and then it just kind of, an opening came up, and they're like, hey, would you want to transport cars for us? And I was still in high school, and we can work on it after school, and on weekends you can do overnight trips. And I think when I said okay, about 3 weeks in, they asked me to go to Chicago on a Wednesday, and I'd asked my mom if I could have the day off school, in my last year of high school, to go do this trip, right? And then it just kept kind of evolving from there. We, we're really starting to roll into the auction business, where we started our first Arizona auction in 2000. I've been to every single one of them. Monterey we had purchased just before I started, but Amelia Island was new, and we just kind of kept developing. And when we opened up in Europe, our first sale at the Ferrari factory in 07 I went to, that was the first time I'd ever been to Europe. And I went from detailing cars to transporting cars to working our lineup, checking in cars, driving them across the auction block, taking clients that our other specialists knew for test drives, and then running our transportation, running lineup for our auctions. And then it was just Rob kind of started bothering me or bugging me to you got to get out of the truck, you got to start get into sales, start following me around. And after saying no a bunch of times, I finally said yes, probably 2008, and kind of started.
Founder of the company.
Yeah, and I started traveling around with him to see collections and see how he operated getting cars consigned. And basically if he signed up some stuff, I'd do whatever he told me to help with it. But I continued to learn, and it just developed into me being good at consigning cars myself and getting collections. And then it worked up to kind of running the company today with a few other people.
Amazing. When you think back on that, I actually remember you saying you were surprised that you could be paid to drive vehicles over an auction block.
Yeah.
So
when I first started, I'm getting $9 an hour, but I'm at an auction, and I get to drive cool cars across the block. Before that I was, washing boats for less money, and enjoyed that as well. But I thought, oh, this job's a lot easier, and it was just kind of lots of hard work, but luck of timing of getting into it, right? It was just the perfect time where the company really started growing, and I just kind of kept my head down and worked hard.
You told me a story of going to look at older vehicles, perhaps with your father, and noticing that there were certain brands had been on hubcaps, and that's how you could identify older cars, and which you have a passion for, kind of the pre-war era.
Yeah, I didn't know of a Duesenberg or a Stutz or classics, when I first started here, but I think because I've been eating and breathing this our restoration shop's attached to the auction side of the business here, that, we've restored, hundreds of pre-war classics. So I think that's just what I saw a lot coming through here and what I was transporting a lot of. And then I got into like knowing which cars start better, have least amount of problems, learning how to tweak them to get them to fire up when I was, hauling them around and stuff. And yeah, just kind of certain marks I like more than others, but classic era is probably unique for somebody my age, where it's normally older people that are into them. But I like the technology of them, and yeah, just kind of growing up around them.
That kind of pre-war piece of it? Yeah.
Duesenbergs, pre-war Mercedes, all that kind of stuff. I know how to drive them. They're a little harder to drive than something like this, and there's such little different coach builders, different things about them that make them more special than you can get a 300 SL in a special color. And yeah, there's a few options, but they're pretty much all the same, where you can get into a Packard and you can get into specially built Packards and Duesenbergs and stuff like that. And it just, they interest me. I like learning about them.
Are there unique personalities that are tied to certain brands that you sell, certain marks that you sell? Do you know a Ferrari or a Mercedes buyer when you see them coming?
No, I think that's a little tough. I mean, there's, definitely clientele of ours that are into a very specific era of car, post-war sports cars, or they just buy Ferraris. And then there's guys that like a little bit of everything. So sometimes I'll be surprised when a American classics buyer all of a sudden wants a European car, or, somebody I have known as a Ferrari buyer all of a sudden is like, hey, I'm interested in an early car, something pre-war. And I think that's what, when people keep talking about, who's going to buy these cars from the 30s, 20 years from now, I think the 50-year-old now that is into stuff like this continues to go to shows, and then all of a sudden he sees something that's attractive, whether it be a Talbot Lago, a Duesenberg, a Mercedes, and what's that, right? And they're going to start learning about it. And, as they age, just like, we all don't dress the same as the way we did 20 years ago, right? Styles change, and I think as you age, you kind of get into different stuff. So I think there'll always be the next, the guy buying modern supercars right now. When he's 65 years old, he's like, okay, I've had all that stuff. I want to try something a little different, right? And buy the pre-war supercar of the era kind of thing.
So we're sitting in your shop surrounded by hundreds of millions of dollars of vehicles. Maybe you can explain for the audience what it is that makes one car more valuable than another. What is it about the mark that changes that equation?
Being the best example of that particular mark is one thing. Quality of restoration, original in terms of original motor, original drivetrain, original body. There's so many different variations between just a car and the best of the best. So, yeah.
And obviously, time and place and events dictate a changing value as well. I'm guessing the rarity of it.
Yeah, and there are things that seem to be a bit of a fad where, kind of after a couple sell, all of a sudden everybody wants to buy an F40 right now, right? F40s are very hot compared to what they were 18 months ago. And, will that trend continue? Perhaps. At some point it'll probably cool off, because everybody that wanted one will finally get them, and then, the prices will start slowing down a little bit. But, over 20 years, I've seen a few cycles of the cars going up and down, and, at the end of the day, buying the best of the best will always long-term be great. And, I have a client dealer friend of mine, and he's like, you can never go wrong buying the best. You can buy too early, but you can never go wrong buying, the best example of that particular car. And I see that. I can see a car's value go down, but as, the cycle goes and things ramp back up, that, the lower mileage one or the original one, or, that special bodied car is always going to pull away from the normal stuff.
Yeah. So speaking of cycles, I mean, we started this conversation talking about the the vehicle that fetched over $140 million. You're set for an event here in August in Monterey on the peninsula where it is likely, it has been predicted, that it will be a record sale that will occur. Perhaps eclipsing the previous mark, going back 5 or 6 years, of $217 million. Give me your prediction.
The top sale our company has ever had in Monterey, I think, is around 170 something, 172, 73. This year we just have a unbelievable, assortment of cars, having the cars from the Oscar Davis collection, which are all, very significant. A lot of them are, hugely valuable. And, we've got this Masterworks of Design collection that we're selling on Thursday evening, which is a lot of pre-war classics for the most part. And, there's just tremendous value added in there. And having the 410 Sport that we have that, Carroll Shelby and Phil Hill and, a lot of important people race that, has an estimate of 25 million. It just, the stars have aligned this year that, we just got this unbelievable package of cars, put together and we're probably going to exceed 200 million, which would be, a record for an auction house to, surpass that number.
Yeah, certainly for you and overall.
Yeah, and we'll do it in 3 nights over 12 hours. This isn't going to be a marathon 7-day, auction. It's going to be 4 hours over 3 nights, and we're going to surpass probably 200 million. So it'll be it's been an amazing year for us so far, and this will be a nice thing to add to this 2022.
Oh, amazing. So. You said the stars aligned. The stars will have aligned. Why? How?
I mean, a lot of it has to do with timing. Hard work. Where timing was just right. Where these collections happen to come up, and certain cars happen to come up all at the same time. It's things we had been working on for several years, and it just kind of happens. Lots of hard work. Nothing is just dropped in our lap, but very fortunate position for us to be in, and we got a lot of hard work to sell all these cars and sell them well for our clients. But it's going to be a fun couple days out there.
I would imagine. Is it a pause for a guy who's been at it since you were 18 to think that you could eclipse that kind of number in a very short period here?
Our founder Rob, lots and lots of times always, told me, values we could do, and being able to touch such significant cars. And if I, a month ago or so, I stepped back and looking at our lineup are cars that I'm handling, and they're not 57 Chevys and 65 Mustangs. They're like, great original 540K Special Roadster to the 410S to a Cal long wheelbase Spider. Like, we're dealing in some of like the best of the best stuff, the 500 TRC and the, lots of important cars that we have. I mean, they're coming through our hands. These are great pieces that, a lot of them that I have known of or seen, but we're actually getting to transact them and touch them and drive them. And it's very special thinking of 40 years ago, I don't know if Rob ever thought he'd get there. And 20 years ago, he definitely had the vision, and, we were handling great cars. But I just look around now and things we're doing globally, right? From selling the SLR for Mercedes-Benz to having a phenomenal, Arizona and Amelia auction earlier this year. And the fact we're going into Monterey, and, we're going to be selling and transacting some of the greatest cars in the world. I think it's, it's very humbling to be a part of it, or, step back and think about it.
Well, and if there's a competitive set in this industry, you're kind of pulling away.
Yeah, competition's good. It keeps us on our toes, and you need that in order to continue to advance our own company. But with Sotheby's, you know, we have a very global brand, and I don't think there's a better brand out there than Sotheby's in the auction world. And when anybody thinks of high-end things, you know, Sotheby's is definitely part of that. So, you know, I think the strength of us combined now is, you know, starting to pull us away from everyone else.
And just back to the pre-war collection that you'll have in Monterey, for you, that's got to be, as you alluded to, that's got to be extremely gratifying to connect your passion for what you really like in the collector market with what you're going to be transacting. Mm-hmm. It's got to be enormously fulfilling, and maybe a bit more of an education for a guy who likes that stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's I'm still very young in our business, so chances of me transacting some of these cars we're going to sell in August again, you know, chances are high that, you know, when I'm in my 60s that I'll get to see these cars again. And, you know, I'm learning about them now, and I'll never forget, you know, what it is about these particular cars and their history. So it's just going to make, you know, me smarter as, you know, I age with this stuff, that I get to be around so much of it.
You're kind of the de facto expert on the future of collectible cars, though, too, aren't you? How do you see yourself as that de facto expert?
You know, it's going to come down to knowledge, right? That's what everybody wants to know. Whoever's the most knowledgeable company or person within that particular make or model that they're into, I think that's what'll set a company like ours apart, that we have great researchers and we have great specialists that are super knowledgeable. And, you know, I don't know every single car and every single mark and every single thing about them. I have my areas that I like more than others. I have a general view of most things, but I can make 2-3 phone calls if I'm in someone's garage and they want to sell a car I don't know much about. I can find out particulars, last ones that sold, what the value is, you know, are there buyers out there for them, rather quickly. And I think that's, not many people can say that. Yeah. You know, and it can be any kind of car.
I'll ask you a specific one, the Andy Warhol Bmw M1. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about that. Do you believe something like that vehicle is valuable as a car and as art? And could it be even more valuable than that Mercedes-Benz?
No, I don't think it's as valuable. Just my personal opinion. Mm-hmm. That's a little, it's hard to say. Obviously it has more value because of Warhol than there's lots of just M1s out there. You know, we sold a Porsche, you know, that Janis Joplin had that, right, you know, had been painted up, and obviously that car, the ownership, and I think what the car looked like is why obviously it commanded so much money, because that was a $150,000 car without any of that, and we sold it for, you know, close to $2 million. So I'd say that the art makes that car obviously more valuable than, you know, the car itself, and it's very famous and well known as, you know, I think people seeing a 300 SL Gullwing, right? I think even non-car people know what that car is, and I would say that M1 could probably be in the same class as that.
It's funny, through the years I've seen my share of sales that are associated with Steve McQueen. Yeah. Anything that Steve McQueen was a part of, if Steve McQueen sat in the car, it was going for 50% higher than it should have. What do you make of that phenomenon? I mean, he didn't do that many movies that most remember.
He's just, you know, I'd say one of the most famous movie stars that was into owning great cars, right? I think it's like Clark Gable of the 30s. Clark Gable owned some amazing pre-war classics.
We saw one in Bruce Meyer's collection.
Yeah, and you know, Steve McQueen's just the guy for owning Lusos and Cal Spiders and 930 turbos, and he just had cool cars, and he was, you know, a cool movie star of the era, and we've sold several cars that he owned, and, you know, I think they bring 5 to 7 times what a normal one does. Right. So it's hard for me to, you know, say why that happens, but we've proven it several times now, so it's just kind of one of those things.
Is there anyone today that could command that kind of attention in the future? Will if we talk about present day movies, will a Tom Cruise owned vehicle eventually be a Steve McQueen like?
What about that? You know, Michael Schumacher comes to mind as somebody that owns some great road cars, and you know, his cars would command, you know, a tremendous amount of money over a standard, whatever it may be. Movie star wise, I'm unsure. I think there's just a shift in things now, and I don't know how important that, you know, becomes anymore. For sure, it may apply to a couple people. I think I just saw a Porsche sell that was Denzel Washington's, right? And did that bring a little bit of a premium online? Yeah, of course it did. It was coming straight from him, and I think it's a cool story to tell. I wouldn't mind, you know, owning a car that he had, or somebody else famous, but I don't know about it bringing that kind of, if there's somebody out there now that could bring the kind of premium that a Steve McQueen did.
How does the collector car market, in your mind, Gord, reflect the real consumer market?
It's you know, I think because of the clientele we deal with, our market doesn't seem to be affected by what's, you know, going on in the rest of the world for the type of clientele we deal with. And you would think that values would slow down, or people wouldn't be into buying this, you know, the kinds of things that we offer. But I think a lot of people are looking for different places to put money into a safe place, and you know, you get to drive and touch and show these kind of cars, so it's, you know, a lot of fun to have, you know, what can be an investment, and you get to play with it at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of talk in the industry about switch to EVs, maybe, you know, autonomous vehicles at some stage. Do you believe there will always be a collector car market as we edge into those new segments?
Yeah, you know, this is a conversation I have with my wife all the time, and obviously it's important that people still want this stuff because of my job, but yeah, it's always going to be around. There's always going to be a love for these kind of cars, and you know, I guess we'll see over the next 20 years how it goes, but yeah, people still like old artwork, old furniture, old boats. Like, it'll always kind of, you know, be around and exist.
So what are the 5 cars we could buy now that will be collectibles? Give me a, off the top of your
like
head,
of modern day
list.
cars?
Correct, yeah, modern day cars.
Oh man, that's tough. Probably buying, in my mind, maybe some of the last of the naturally aspirated cars. You know, I don't know if it's, you know, Chrysler's going to go all electric, and the Hellcat, I think it is going to be done after next year, and I think Subaru, their WRX STI, I think if they haven't finished, they might have already finished, but they're going all electric, so I think buying the last of that type of car, obviously whatever Ferrari may be the last, you know, one, I think picking out some of that stuff, and
as the era changes, getting in on the final.
Yeah, I think that stuff will probably have good opportunities, you know, long term.
The first Model S.
Yeah, you know, we've sold some Tesla Roadsters, I think. You know, they seem to be bringing a lot of, you know, money. So, and I've seen them in some collections. So I think we're actually selling one out in Monterey, but yeah, I think the first of a generation is something to go after too, right? The first Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing has got a premium over the car that was built 30 in. So I think getting into the first of stuff, it's hard to say.
How about 5 that might be under the radar in everyone's investment portfolio?
New or old?
Either
Just
or.
Collectible?
Sure.
You know, I think looking at things that, you know, of my generation, I guess, is what 40-year-olds would have had on their walls as kids. I think you're already seeing it with Countach's.
Countach. I was just going to say the same.
And, you know, Countach's went up and they came back down, and now they're really taking off again. And I I believe that's because the 40 to 50-year-olds that kind of have money is like, that's a car I can remember seeing all the time, right? That, yeah, if you know, you start getting into collecting, and I think that's a car, you know, when I started with the company 20 years ago, a 300 SL Roadster was like 150 grand, 200 grand, you know, max. And today they're $1 million minimum, right? And they're never going to go back down. And I do see a Countach, you know, being $1 million car, and I don't ever see it going back to being worth 300 or 400 grand. I think they'll just kind of keep marching up. Now it's acceptable to have one, you know, restored, those kind of things. Testarossa, you know, 959s have always been popular. You know, I guess it's those specialty cars of the 80s and early, you know, 90s, and you know, mileage and maybe special color. Those are things that are gonna, you know, definitely stand out. You know, we just sold this white Enzo. It brought a significant premium over a red car, right?
It was one of one, correct?
Only one.
Right.
So, and people are understanding that, you know, a car from the 50s that's a one-off color, whatever it may be, is bringing a premium. So if you're looking into the future, that's definitely a car that, you know, is worth chasing down and owning, and you know, mileage didn't matter on a car like that. And I think we'll start seeing that, where it doesn't matter that you have a 200-mile F40. I mean, it'll still command value, but I think that'll change over time. You know, a Daytona Coupe with 10,000 miles on it isn't that much more of a premium than one that's been fully restored that you don't even know how many miles are on it, whether it's 60, 160, you know, it's about condition. So I think that'll become less relevant, you know, going on if people want to get into, you know, using and driving these things.
Where do you see the role of Japanese cars in the collector car world? There's one sitting just behind me here.
Yep. We have a couple coming out to Monterey as well, and I think that's just timing, being able to get them into the country. But you know, they've already started to prove that they're bringing premiums, and I think it's just a matter of the allowance of being able to start bringing them into the country as they, you know, age over that 25-year mark.
So, as we conclude here, what are your favorite, not necessarily most valuable cars, that if you were to put 5 in your personal collection, what would they be?
I have a 66 GT350 Shelby, so I'd never sell that, love it, you know, have wanted one of those for a long time. A Duesenberg, you know, I'd love to have one of those, a 2-door convertible coupe of some sort. A Lusso or a 275 GTB if I were to ever own a Ferrari. I like coupes. I think
driven by Steve McQueen, obviously.
Yeah, I'll take just a normal one. You know, one of those I think would be cool. You know, that's 3. I don't know. There's so much stuff that I get to see, so that, you know, I could have a really big garage, a Testarossa, an early Testarossa, and yeah, I know they don't drive great, but I think you need to appreciate every car for the era that it was built. I know it doesn't drive like in 2015, but super cool car. I used to watch Miami Vice as a kid. Like the fact that I even get to drive them, I mean, that's something that I can look back on that I never thought life would, you know, allow me into that, let alone, you know, everything else. Yeah, Countaches, I don't know if I'd want to drive one, but, you know, they're pretty to look at. And it's, you know, one of those other cars that you know, buying one of those in a special color and, you know, learning about the cars too. There's lots of different idiosyncrasies between those. They're not all the same. There's lots of different configurations and colors and engines and that kind of stuff. And I'm starting to, you know, get interested in those. And I don't know if it's a hype of the value is starting to take off, but I'm learning that, you know, they built a lot of special stuff.
I actually had one final thing. Will you take a moment when you pass the 200 million barrier in Monterey in August just to acknowledge the record, realize the context of where this company's come from, where it is today, where you've come from, driving those cars over the auction block and making the $9 an hour? Will you take that moment with the team and
yeah,
acknowledge it in some way?
We definitely like to, you know, acknowledge our successes and stuff after a sale. I mean, I don't have a counter to find out when we actually crack that number during the auction. You're very focused on the auction, but I think afterwards to put our team, have our team together, and we have people that work for us around the world, but to be there, and an auction like Monterey is something that gets started on. You're working on it as soon as the one that you just finished is completed, right? In the fall of the year before, you're literally starting to think about what's it going to look like, where a car is going to come from. So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work from dozens and dozens of people, from our writers and researchers to marketing to press to, there's just so many people that all add value in order to get us to the auction, to selling them, that all have a little piece of making it successful. And we have a great team that loves working here and loves working together, and I think that just makes cheersing to success after even better, that the people that work here aren't here for a job. They're here because they love the business, love the people, love the clients, and that makes it more special. I don't know how many companies can say that, right? That there's nobody here that's here just for a paycheck.
Well, and you're, as I said at the opening, I mean, you're right at the center of cars and culture, and I'm guessing the folks who work here are just as much into the culture as they are the vehicle.
Yeah, we have a unique culture here, and it's a great company, and that's why there's been so many people here for such a long time. And it's an interesting business that you never know what the next year's gonna bring on. So I think that's it. Keeps all of us on our toes and enjoying our jobs. Well,
kudos to you. You have a ringside seat for all of this that's occurring. But
yeah,
thank you so much, Gord, for being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.